World Cup 2026 will really be an exciting one as it is bringing 48 teams, which makes it the largest tournament ever.
It's great news for operators because that means more matches. It's great news for sportsbook users because there's more games to bet on. There's more entertainment.
We're expecting something like $150 billion worth of wagers over this World Cup, which is like insane.
You really can teach players to be more responsible. In the end, the market and the players vote for the things they like. You need to be sure you are putting the player first, not trying to overcomplicate his life.
Preparation for us starts weeks, to be honest, months before the start of the Football World Cup, typically through performance testing and stress testing the resiliency of our platforms. Our platforms need to be able to handle hundreds, if not thousands of bets per second.
I personally don't subscribe to this idea that player protection is the enemy of commercial. I think actually if you look at the player behavior and the data from a holistic point of view, you can look through the lens of risk, and that actually gives you more opportunity to understand what's happening with your player base.
What's the secret to converting one tournament fan into a long-term user? How can operators optimize the retention from the new bettors and extend the LTV? Hello everyone, welcome to Revpanda Live at the third episode of our World Cup 2026 series. As you may have already noticed, the first substitute already took place here at this podcast. Father could not join today due to health reasons, so I will be your host at Revpanda Live today. We have less than 2 months left to the biggest sporting event of the year. Operators, affiliates, and B2B providers are all working super hard to prepare for this tournament. And today, together with my guests, we will talk about tech, product, and player protection. So I've got 3 experts joining me today. Paula Murphy, Head of Commercial at Mindway AI, Gareth Crook, SVP of Sports at Pragmatic Play, and Kirill Yudvikevich, Head of Product at Tonybet. Everyone, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have such a great lineup today.
Thank you, guys. Good to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. And before we get started, let's maybe have a short round of introduction for those listeners who just met you at our show. Paula, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, of course. So, hi, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Paula Murphy. I'm head of commercial at Mindway AI, and we provide a really unique combination of psychological assessments and AI technology for player tracking for responsible gambling purposes.
Amazing. Gareth?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm Gareth Crook, SVP of Sports at Pragmatic Play. We are a leading B2B sportsbook provider. We provide the sportsbook infrastructure and technology for leading operators around the world, but also a range of managed services such as sportsbook trading, risk management, and round-the-clock support. Prior to this, I had a lot of experience in operator brands such as William Hill, Ladbrokes, and Coral, predominantly in the UK market. Worked in sports betting for far too long, 26th year, I think. Looking forward to getting tackled on the subject of the Football World Cup. It's a big one.
Brilliant. And Kirill, would love to learn more about you.
Yeah, hello everyone. So Kirill Yudvikevich, Head of Product at Tonybet. So we operating in the worldwide with local licenses. I'm personally a year and a half with Tonybet in the industry for almost 6 years. So basically, we are focusing on tier 1 markets, both casino, sportsbook, and always accessing new licenses. So like the toughest ones, I'll say, it's always new challenges for us that we kind of want to achieve across like regulated markets all over the world, whether it's North America, like Canada, either it's Europe or in perspective any other part of the world.
Amazing. And thank you so much for the short introductions. And we have the tradition in our podcast series, before we start the serious talk, which is your favorite team in this World Cup? Paula?
You must be able to hear it in the accent. It's got to be England for me.
I figured. How about you, Gareth?
Definitely not England. I'm a Welshman, so I'm coming into this Football World Cup as a neutral. We got knocked out a couple of weeks ago. But I'm going to be rooting for Colombia from a betting perspective at odds of 41.0. They're my outsiders tip.
Amazing. We're good. We're going to have really interesting conversation, Wales versus England. Kirill, how about you?
I'll say it's not connected with our local license in Netherlands, but historically a good friend of mine was cheering up every World Cup for Netherlands. So I am here also will cheer up for Netherlands.
Amazing. Personally, I should be rooting for Turkey since Poland did not get in. However, Bosnia went into the World Cup, so I'm really rooting for them. This is a historical moment for them. So each World Cup has its own place for the fans, like Italy 1990, where we had real football passion, or more recently, that incredible final in Qatar. World Cup 2026 will really be an exciting one, as it is bringing together 48 teams, which makes it the largest tournament ever. From our industry point of view, why do you think this tournament will be a different one? Maybe we'll start with Gareth.
Yeah, I think you answered it somewhat there by saying like 48 teams competing in what is the first ever globalized World Cup. It's great news for operators because that means more matches. It's great news for sportsbook users because there's more games to bet on. There's more entertainment. But I think it means there's going to be a lot of mismatches. There's some teams in this Football World Cup that I never thought I would see on such a stage. I think in the first round, I was looking at the fixture list the other day. Haiti, Cape Verde, Curacao, these are not teams that you normally see in Football World Cups. Begrudge it slightly given Wales are not there. So you're going to see a lot of mismatches, not only in the group stages, but arguably some of the knockout rounds as well. There's definitely going to be some one-sided matches. And I think the challenge for operators is how do you maintain engagement during what is likely to be many one-sided contests? And then perhaps a shout out as well. This is the first Football World Cup where a rights holder has won the official betting data and video streaming coverage. Congratulations to Stats Perform. We endorse our relationships with official rights holders, and there you've got Stats Perform, the official rights holder of betting data, and live video streaming for the first time for a Football World Cup. So two angles, volume of matches, one-sided matches, but official data and streaming rights.
Amazing. Yes, this is definitely very interesting. And Kirill, Paula, do you have something to add maybe?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be super exciting. We're going from 64 matches to 104. So from a gambling industry perspective, more activity will mean more opportunity to have skin in the game. I think I read somewhere that we're expecting something like $150 billion worth of wagers over this World Cup, which is like insane to even get your head around. I think the main key things, obviously, that sort of bigger tournament, more fixtures, more skin in the game. Also thinking about regulatory changes that have taken place. Obviously, North America, a lot of regulation has gone on there. An audience that doesn't necessarily always engage with soccer will be engaged because it's a home tournament for them. The regulatory landscape now in Brazil, with Brazil being a regulated market, is going to open it up to literally millions of people. So I think that's going to be interesting. The only other bits that I would really add to that is technology, sort of personalization, AI-driven personalization is going to make a difference, I think, to the betting patterns that we see, and also the options for like in-play betting, parlays, that kind of thing. You know, it's not just betting on the outcome of the match, it's betting on the next corner, or how many corners are going to be taken in that match, or how many shots on target. So I think we're going to see something quite interesting there, and I think we'll probably get a turnout of new gamblers that we haven't seen betting previously.
This is amazing. And how about you, Kirill? What do you think is different?
So on a global scale of things, yeah, it becomes a real marathon of, and you really need to keep like players refreshed, not overexhaust them with this. Despite it's been a holiday for everyone and really people passionate for the game, but even too much of a good thing may become an issue for some players. So yeah, you need to be sure that everybody's been entertained, but still keeping their pace, the pace they prefer. And the second thing is we are always chasing new regulations on the markets, and some regulations, as an example, Alberta province in Canada, they are kind of overlap. So it's double work for our teams. And it involves like basically all the teams across the brand to both maintain the sportsbook offer during the World Cup and to make sure that we are fully licensed and prepared for the market launch in Alberta. Also, Ireland is going to be regulated soon, and also has a little of overlap, despite the team wasn't able to join the cup. So it's kind of sad, but it is what it is. So yeah, a lot of work, a lot of entertainment, and not forget that it's really, despite only less than 2 months, it still became like a kind of marathon for users.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Gareth, a larger World Cup also means a bigger global audience. So Pragmatic Play Sports powers some of the world's biggest operators. How do you ensure platform uptime and odd accuracy for your operators where millions of global fans hit their websites simultaneously?
Yeah, super important question. I mentioned at the start that we're a provider, typically the provider of the sportsbook technology for our partners. So the preparation for us starts weeks, to be honest, months before the start of the Football World Cup, typically through performance testing and stress testing the resiliency of our platforms. There are certain metrics that we scrutinize to death, such as concurrent bet placement. Our platforms need to be able to handle hundreds, if not thousands of bets per second. Such are the volumes coming through on an event like this. It could be settlement speeds. It could be page load speeds. So ultimately, we test the maximum capability of our platforms weeks out before the start of a World Cup. The spikes in traffic are typically predictable for a Football World Cup, to be honest. You know, the fixture card and kickoff times are there for everyone to see. So we know that spikes in traffic's typically going to be 10, 20 minutes before a match starts, and then again at half time. So doing the tournament itself, ongoing monitoring, looking for perhaps areas where platform resiliency is going to be breached or not, which is hopefully the case in our instance. And then second part to the question, like odds accuracy and price latency, I mentioned in my previous answer that Stats Perform are the official rights holders of betting data for the Football World Cup. So our relationship with official betting data rights holders guarantees very low price latency, but then metrics which are super important for the operator, like market uptime, the amount of time the event is actually available to bet will be at its maximum, typically close to 100% of the time. And then when the match is finished, that bets are settled and processed at pace. So short summary, weeks and months of planning through performance testing and then scrutiny during the tournament itself to make sure that operators are happy with our service.
Yeah, always be testing, right?
Right.
And Kirill, I know that you've been preparing for this tournament for a long time, just as Gareth was. And I'm so curious to learn how Tonybet is preparing for the big surge in the betting volume on the product side.
So it was done even before to optimize the performance on the brand with local servers in Canada, for example, as one of the key markets. So it will help a lot for certain. Other than that, yeah, a lot of work and the promotional stuff, I think, was aligned a year ahead of this World Cup. So now the technical teams, the CRM and marketing, they are kind of bringing it to life. So when we really have less than 2 months before the start. So yeah, infrastructure will be ready with additional volumes to connect in case of any kind of, I don't know, DDoS attacks or anything that may happen. So it's like just the basic stuff that happens quite a lot during the big events. But yeah, anti-fraud team, I guess, one of also big things there to make sure everybody gets like healthy attention from our side. Yeah, like promotional stuff, I think we'll dive deeper into it later, is one of the selling points for us. So we're making sure that everybody is aligned and working on this promo, like giving everything they have for now.
This is really great. And obviously the World Cup will bring millions of people to betting for the very first time. Paula, at Mindway AI, you have Game Scanner and similar tools to learn from player patterns over time. However, these players, they don't really have a behavioral baseline. How do operators protect a player that they've never seen before without any history, risk profile, or established behavioral baseline to compare against?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it was a point that I made in the introductions as well. Obviously, we do hope we are going to have a lot of acquisition activity going on during the time of the World Cup. So at Mindway, we have multiple models running. So our main risk score model does look at a data window of 92 days. And it's always looking at that long-term behavior. But that is then supplemented by 14 different risk factor models and also an intensity model that looks at short-term play and changes in intensity of play. So Game Scanner will actually give you a risk score from day one. Looking at the data that is available with all of these models working in conjunction with one another. And that will be a pretty accurate risk score. Obviously, as the data builds, the accuracy also builds. So what we make sure we do there as well, so that we've got that kind of backstop position, is we have, I guess, safety net controls in place where you can set alerts on sort of threshold-based things. Like, so you will pick somebody up if they're depositing unusually high sums of money or spending like really high periods of time or particular unusual behaviors. And for something like the World Cup, we encourage all of our partners to think about those backstops and think about what you need to have in place there just to make sure nobody falls through the cracks. The other thing that I think is really important is that what the models are really looking for is loss of control. When they're flagging sort of higher risk gambling behavior. And it is quite easy to denote controlled behavior from uncontrolled behavior, even when you don't have a lot of data to back that up with. So there'll be a huge kind of focus on looking at control, using the daily intensity model to understand what's going on with the players there. And then the other thing that I should definitely say is this kind of AI-driven risk-based approach is obviously only one tool in the operator's toolbox. They have a lot of other controls in place as well, and they need to make sure that it's being combined with a good intervention strategy, that they have areas that they can point players to so that they can get help if certain behaviors are observed, and ideas of ways for people to manage their safer gambling, along with like kind of some kind of education, certainly for new gamblers who won't necessarily be as up to date or as informed as to how odds work and that kind of thing. So it's a huge task. And again, as same as the guys said, right, it's all about planning. It's all about being prepared ahead of time, think about different alerts that you're going to need and how you're going to transition that over for early life players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how prepared you all are, not just for this podcast, but in general. Gareth, the World Cup is the biggest sports event of the year, and operators are really preparing for it as we speak, as we just noticed here. what are your top 3 recommendations for Sportsbook to make sure that they're actually ready for the biggest World Cup ever?
Yeah, I think to date I've spoken about our responsibility as a provider of the technology, but it doesn't stop there. Through Pragmatic Play's range of managed services, we ultimately are positioned to help inform the operator on their strategy going into a tournament of significance like a Football World Cup. So I think 3 areas. If you're on the operator side, whether it's an operator on proprietary technology or outsourcing their technology to a provider like Pragmatic Play, comes back to my previous answer. Make sure your platforms have been stress tested in advance of the Football World Cup starting, so you're not scrambling to find a recovery plan during the tournament itself. That's a terrible position to be in. So that would be number 1, hark back to my previous answer. Number 2, I think I'll refer to having sat through years and years of customer insight decks when I was on the operator side, and typically the common pain points for sportsbook customers are site speed, going back to performance testing, but also site navigation, being able to find the content that you want. So sportsbook homepages have to be designed and configured to allow users to find the most relevant betting selections in as fewer clicks as possible. We know that markets like bet builders, player markets, outright markets are going to be driving a lot of revenue growth for operators during this tournament. So customers shouldn't have to go looking for that type of content. It should be readily surfaced. And then I think one of the biggest pieces of advice for sportsbook operators, ultimately, consumers have got a lot of choice these days on which sportsbook operator to choose, right? Markets like UK, North America, Brazil have been regulated for some time now. There are a number of operators that dominate market share there. There's a lot of choice. Sportsbook customers we know are quite promiscuous. They can jump from one operator to the other. How do you really capture the majority of wallet share during the 4 or 5 weeks of the Football World Cup? I think the KPIs that operators ought to focus on are player days, simply put, the number of individual World Cup days that a user will bet on. Hitting as, I don't know how many days there are on the Football World Cup. Let's say there's 28, but hitting as close to 28 player days as possible would be a good objective, business objective for the operator. But also the number of bets per customer. Typically on a game day, there's going to be often 3 or 4 individual World Cup matches. And how do you retain that wallet share between the events? There's quite a few mechanics. We haven't got enough time to mention them all, but free-to-play games with the concept of leaderboards would be a very good one to keep customers retained during the 4-week window. And then various parts of the promotional strategy to ensure that customers are betting from game 1 into game 2, into game 3, plugged in by real-time marketing campaigns through CRM teams. So that's the type of planning I think all operators ought to focus on.
I love that. And fans are not only betting online. During the World Cup, the action kind of splits across online sports books and also physical betting venues simultaneously. And at Mindway AI, Paula, you've expanded Game Scanner into land-based casino environments. Does the risk profile differ between a player betting, I don't know, online at 2 a.m. and one sitting in a sportsbook lounge watching the match? How does your monitoring approach adapt across those environments?
Yeah. So the short answer to that is yes. We do see different betting patterns in a land-based environment than you would online. We have actually done quite a lot of work with our operator partners in the land-based space and our expert panel of psychologists in understanding those different behaviors and training the algorithm to be able to pick them up and to understand what setting it's in. And I think probably a really interesting point of this actually is that although you see different routes into that sort of higher risk realm, once the player reaches that higher risk realm, there is quite a bit of consistency in how the behaviors manifest at that point in time. But it's about understanding the routes in and understanding those behaviors in context. Context is always hugely important in everything that we do. And the example that you give of the player at 2 a.m. online is actually a really, really good one. Because I think universally people sort of accept that nightly play can definitely be a marker of harm, but not all nightly play is equal. So you would treat a player who is betting on a sporting activity that takes place outside of their time zone, but they're showing otherwise controlled behavior, their deposits are controlled, very, very differently than a player that sort of started playing in the evening and that run through into the early hours of the morning. And you're seeing erratic deposits, you're seeing loss chasing behavior, you're seeing them spreading their activity across a lot of different products. Like these two players are not equal. So that's where context comes in, and understanding the sort of whole view of what is happening with that player and not just being over reliant on single markers.
These are some brilliant insights. Kirill, Tonybet runs leaderboards, weekly competitions, and odds boosters as regular features. How are you adapting your gamification mechanics specifically for the World Cup? Are there tournament-specific missions, challenges, or World Cup leaderboards to increase the player engagement?
Yeah, I really want to say that I really appreciate analytical approach of everyone on this podcast. Really, I really like this when
True.
people dive deeper into the context, into the numbers, not like doing only marketing and pure marketing. So that's really nice. Thanks. So back to Tonybet. So during the 2025, we implemented gamification widget. We implemented and reworked a lot of CRM campaigns that helped us grow quite a lot together with heavy acquisition. So, but it's not only like that we increased our players database, but also like the quality of users due to segmentation and personalization became much, much better. And then the same approach will be transferred for the World Cup period, but additionally to it, we are implementing like this kind of extra value for users. There will be, I won't dive too deep inside into it, but there will be some kind of album with, you can say, stickers or card packs that users can collect representing the World Cup teams during the event. And that's kind of should resonate with the players database, with those same users that used to buy those stickers somewhere during the period in their life, and they can return to Tonybet to collect, to not only bet, but to collect, to compare with each other what they achieved. And there definitely will be a bigger price for each market. I cannot share the amounts right now with you, but there definitely will be a really, really high reward, maybe a ceremony of rewarding the players. We'll see. But yeah, that's kind of the main selling point during the World Cup. This kind of album with something to collect, with to get this extra value for the players, not to be heavily burdened by this kind of difficult mechanics, but as simple as that: make bets, receive cards, enjoy. That's it.
That sounds really amazing. And I want to stay with the topic of player engagement. Gareth, with 48 teams in this World Cup, we're going to see some quite brutal group stage mismatches. A match goes 3-0 at halftime. The result is done, but there are still 45 minutes to play, technically. How do interval-based betting markets and player props, or player markets specifically, keep a bettor engaged during that dead time? Do you think operators can solve the blowout problem with micro betting products?
Yeah, I think those types of bet types and those types of markets has a huge role to play during the Football World Cup, especially. I don't think there's particularly a problem to solve here, to be honest. Across domestic leagues, which are perhaps more competitive than some of the matches we're going to see in the Football World Cup, we've already seen that customers are gravitating towards these types of markets, away from more traditional markets, such as 1x2, correct score, over-under goals, for example. We're seeing huge increases year on year in player-based markets, especially shots on goal. We're seeing growth in player fouls, for example. So these types of markets are fast becoming the new way of betting. But as you mentioned, in matches that are perhaps going to be more one-sided than we've seen in other competitions, I've mentioned a little earlier, teams like Haiti and Cape Verde, for example, competing in this World Cup. It's quite feasible that you're going to see teams leading 5 or 6-0 at half-time. And I think it's important for operators to understand that the match isn't dead at that point, but there's a range of markets available to the consumer, such as player shots on goal, or whether Yamal go on and score his hat-trick, for example. And then you mentioned micro markets or time-based markets. Will there be a goal in the 56th to 60th minute, and so on? So I think the World Cup will continue the tradition and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The fact that these types of markets are experiencing significant growth, and I think perhaps the Football World Cup will magnify that growth, given the one-sided nature of some of the matches. Yeah, so I expect it to be a huge focus for operators, and it definitely is for us as a provider of managed trading services and the product itself.
Yeah, this is absolutely going to be exciting. There was a Polish coach, a legend, actually, and he would say, as long as the ball is in play, anything can happen. Even it's 3-0, things can happen.
And not to say, there will be some shocks as well. It wasn't, I think it was in the last World Cup, Saudi Arabia beat Argentina in what was perhaps the biggest World Cup shock of all time. So not all of these matches are going to be one-sided. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And Paula, there is a misconception in the market. So usually people understand that player protection measures are against the player engagement actions. You often use the phrase at your panel discussions, player protection, not player prevention, publicly. What does that actually mean in practice during the World Cup when operators are under enormous commercial pressure to maximize acquisition?
I do say that a lot. I'm glad somebody's paying attention. And it's a really fair question, right? I think it's true that operators are under a lot of commercial pressure. And I also don't have any issue with the World Cup being seen as a commercial driver. It absolutely should be. It's right, and it's going to be huge, and it's going to be fun. And the opportunity for people to have a bit of skin in the game there is a really exciting thing. So I don't see a problem with that. Along with that commercial pressure, though, also comes the pressure to retain those players that you bring in, and as you're acquiring new players, you don't want to be losing them to problem gambling. You don't want to be losing them to burnout. You want a sustainable player base. Also, alongside that pressure comes the regulatory pressure. That doesn't go away just because it's a World Cup. We still have obligations to protect our players and to do that in a responsible manner. So there are different considerations that are all sort of coming together in this one space. Now, I personally don't subscribe to this idea that player protection is the enemy of commercial. I think actually, if you look at the player behavior and the data from a holistic point of view, you can look through the lens of risk, and that actually gives you more opportunity to understand what's happening with your player base, to communicate in a more personalized way with players, to understand which players it is appropriate to be sending certain marketing to and which players actually should be excluded from that marketing, and making sure that you do that before the risk escalates to a point where you've actually got a problem where the only option is exclusion for that player. What a lot of our operator partners tell us is after they've deployed Game Scanner, what they see is self-exclusions dropping off a cliff because they're picking up problems much earlier. They're steering players back to sustainability, and therefore the money that they save when you quantify that by not losing these players, we all know that acquisition is very expensive. You want to be maintaining the players that you've got there. There is very much a commercial argument for this, as well as it being, the right thing to do. I've worked in this industry for going on a decade, and my experience of that is that people don't want to harm the players. That isn't a driver. People want to see players enjoying what they do. So if we can put those controls in place, we can have the safeguards, we can still maintain the commercial side of doing it. That's what I mean by player protection, not player prevention. I would have a crazy business model if I didn't want my partners to grow. We're completely invested in that. But it's just about identifying those few players, and it always is a small percentage of the full player base when you look at the risk distribution, but those few players that do actually need help.
Yeah. There's a saying, imagine it's for your own good. You know, it's happening for their own good.
Yeah. Do you know what, as well, it drives advocacy. It drives people actually believing in your business, and it drives people actually wanting to come back and do business with you because they feel safe there. There's quite a lot of studies that show that player protection interventions actually lift player advocacy. So it's a good thing.
Amazing. And Gareth, you've worked at both operator and supplier sides, and you're really one of the best people to ask that question. What's the secret to converting a one tournament fan into a long-term user? How can operators optimize the retention from the new bettors and extend the LTV of these users?
Perhaps won't give all the secrets on this short podcast, but I think the Football World Cup has the beauty of allowing a sportsbook operator to activate potentially a very big audience, right? If you are a sports bettor already, you're probably going to be having a bet on the Football World Cup. It's probably the biggest sporting spectacle in the last 4 years, right? Football traditionally is a core revenue driver for most sportsbooks around the world. And this tournament being held in North America, where perhaps football isn't a core commercial driver, perhaps has an opportunity to drive growth for North American operators as well. So activating the audience the weeks before the Football World Cup is critical to ensure you've got as much market share during the 4 or 5 weeks itself. Going back to my previous points, product speed and stability, ensuring that your customers have a safe and enjoyable betting experience during the Football World Cup itself is critical. And I've mentioned various ways in which you can ensure that from the operator side. But then I think in terms of the ability to convert a World Cup active, a World Cup user into a long-term user, don't forget, when that World Cup final finishes, there's only 4 or 5 weeks before the start of the domestic seasons, right? That's not a long time. So what are the mechanics that you can put in place to ensure that a customer comes back in 4 or 5 weeks' time when the domestic football season starts? There's a variety of ways in which you can incentivize that. We've found when I was on the operator side through previous data that if you've got an open bet, you're more likely to come back and visit your sportsbook of choice. So imagine having a free bet having a bet on the World Cup final gives you a free bet on the opening day of the Premier League or La Liga season, right? That provides an incentive to come back in 4 or 5 weeks' time. I think free-to-play games has got a good role to play there as well. If there's been a free-to-play game that has been enjoyable for the consumer during the tournament itself, then repeat that mechanic during the domestic seasons. So I think it starts with ensuring that your audience is having a safe and enjoyable betting experience during the tournament itself. But then you've got various mechanics to incentivize the user to come back when domestic seasons have started. There's many ways in which you can do that, but hopefully I've mentioned some of them.
These are some brilliant points, Gareth. Thank you so much. And Kirill, we know that new players acquired during a World Cup have a very different LTV profile compared to regular bettors, of course. Without giving away the secret sauce, can you suggest some proven retention strategies for the industry? How do you plan to keep these users on your platform long after the final match?
Yeah, thanks. On a very basic level, I can say don't break the player patterns, but reinforce them. I think that may be the main thing that I'm really big fan of, because as the years in this industry showed, you really can teach players to be more responsible, to engage them into ways of playing, or like certain providers, a certain type of bets. But in the end, the market and the players vote for the things they like with their active days during the week, with their returning patterns, with the games they like and the bets they place. So you can teach a little bit and show maybe the way, but they are always, I think, the leading part of this whole thing. So you need to be sure you are putting the player first and not trying to overcomplicate his life. If a player has this kind of seasonal approach into betting, when he bets during the World Cup and then he returns when the season starts, or even maybe during the holiday season, during the winter, because he likes those kind of big fun stuff, big prizes, entertainment all over, and not a really big fan on betting on everyday basis. Yeah, be sure to contact him at the right moment, not try to over spam him, as it's became kind of, I think, an issue of this industry when everybody like sends ton of emails, push notifications, kind of hunting for the player in a way. Yeah, I understand there is always a rivalry between the brands, and they kind of want to give the best experience themselves and give a player the chance to know about this. But, finding this balance in everything and understanding your players with a great approach, with the right segmentation and understanding the needs, I don't know, that can be like interviews, some Q&A, done with your regular users, and understanding their needs is the key. So don't overcomplicate the player's life and stick to their patterns, like reinforce them with the help of your product.
These are really brilliant insights. I really like your approach, Kirill. And as we come to the end of this conversation, I want to ask Paula, if an operator still doesn't have a solid plan for their player protection strategies for pre, during, and post-World Cup period, what steps should they take? Can you maybe share some of your recommendations?
Yeah, that thought terrifies me. I would hope that most operators, in fact, probably, I know all the operators that we're partnered with, but I would hope most operators have been considering this and do have a solid plan. I mean, it's very much part of the equation. It's not something that's going to go away in the regulated market. And it's all about planning for the capacity in the same way as you would across the rest of the business. We've been talking on this podcast about plan, test, make sure this is working, make sure you've got the capacity. It's exactly the same in the safer gambling space, making sure you've got that in place. We've actually done quite a bit of work recently around seasonal events and the impact of seasonal events on risk assessments. And it's an area that I'm personally really interested in. And I think my advice to operators is think about this logically. You are going to see an increase in activity during something like the World Cup. Of course you are. But also you need to bear in mind that your players will have planned for this as well. They will have been saving, they will have set time aside. So just because you see that increase in activity, don't sort of be worrying that necessarily indicates a huge increase in risk as well. It's about tracking and understanding the full behavior in context, as we said before. The other bit I should say on that is that if you spoke to any of the members of our expert panel, some of the input that they've said around this work as well is that they often speak to patients when they have them about events like the World Cup being a potential relapse event as well. So be mindful of that. See the player behavior in this kind of holistic frame, and don't sort of just give up on the tracking just because the World Cup is over. It's really important that you continue to monitor really closely, that you see that where there has been spikes in behavior, that behavior does normalize after something like the World Cup and actually is seasonal behavior. The other bit of advice I would give is work with suppliers who specialize in this area. At Mindway, we have 4 distinct sort of I would say, capabilities around understanding the behavioral science, understanding the regulatory landscape, understanding the technology, and also having members of the team who have walked the walk, done the talk, done the job that the operators do, been head of product, been head of safer gambling. They get the workflow. So I think it's really important to utilize that expertise. And my final point is it's all about the data. It's always all about the data. So have your data in order.
It's funny how it always comes down to the data. Paula, thank you so much for your insights. They were really great. Thank you to Gareth and Kirill as well. So today, after this insightful conversation, it's very clear to me that for operators, winning the World Cup 2026 means optimizing your engine for massive traffic while using micro-betting to bridge the engagement gap. And by prioritizing player protection today, operators can turn a one-time tournament surge into a permanent loyal community. So Paula, Gareth, Kirill, thank you so much for your insights and for sharing your knowledge with us. I will make sure that we drop your contacts so that anyone can reach them out directly for your questions or requests. And please remember that the next episode of Revpanda Live World Cup series will be about how affiliates are preparing for the tournament. So make sure you follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube and major podcast platforms. Thank you so much for watching and see you at our next session, hopefully with Faruk.
Thanks, guys. Great to chat.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.